what that news from Axios probably means that Russia is not going to like that, and so then basically it's almost like a ping pong match where
Yes.
one side says this is bad for us, then the other side says, oh, this is good for us, bad for us. So it goes back and forth, and so they're trying to look for something in the middle to try to make this deal happen.
Let's cross the Atlantic in a single leap and welcome to the programme Daniel Lippman, the White House reporter for Politico. Hi to you, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. As we speak now, Daniel, the President's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is giving her regular briefing. We're keeping an ear and an eye on that. And as soon as something comes up, we're going to go there. You'll miss, I promise you, nothing of what you will want to hear. But where do we start, Daniel? I mean, I guess we could start with Ukraine, of course, because Steve Witkoff is on his way out there. He's going to have a Kushner as well, Jared Kushner there, the president's son-in-law, and they're going to be talking again about trying to get closer to some sort of deal. Just generally, first of all, Daniel, what's the mood about this latest attempt to find some sort of deal there in the administration in Washington, D.C.? Is there any optimism? Because Russia, as I've said and said again, they just don't seem to be budging.
There's some optimism, or they would not be trying, but they have been down this road before, and they haven't had any success. And so we did see with the Gaza ceasefire, it took many efforts, numerous times, numerous visits to get a deal, and they were able to. But both parties were sick of fighting, and so you can see why they had a deal there.
Yeah.
But Russia, Putin doesn't seem to show any interest in having a fair deal, and Ukraine is not going to sign up for something that is
Yes.
really hurt their country.
And that's a key point, isn't it, Daniel? In the case of the Gaza deal, the president had some very, very powerful cards in his hand because Israel needed him. It needed America, needed Donald Trump on side, couldn't afford to let that relationship completely sour. In the case of Ukraine, well, look, Ukraine wants and needs America too, but it's not the same in that if Donald Trump chose to walk away, first of all, there'd be a bit of a problem with that on his own side, wouldn't there, among colleagues in Congress and American public opinion. But also, Ukraine, they say, and it's hard to disbelieve them, they would fight on. They'll just keep on fighting, which is different.
Yeah, exactly. That they need Ukraine's buy-in here, and they don't want to be accused of setting something up that is too favorable to Russia. And also, even if you have a temporary ceasefire for a few weeks, Donald Trump does not want to have to return to the negotiating table. He wants to have something that's enduring. He wants to get his Nobel Peace Prize here. He doesn't want to have to solve Ukraine every year, every 6 months, and that would just bog down his presidency. And I think he's also faced a lot of pressure from European countries as well, where they say, we've done everything you've asked us to in terms of NATO spending. Now come back us up with helping Ukraine.
I mean, there's some news breaking just now on the news agency Axios. I wonder if you've got any insight into all of this. It tells us that President Trump, in this report, President Trump's peace plan for Ukraine includes a security guarantee modelled on NATO's Article 5, which would commit the US and European allies to treat an attack on Ukraine, this is after a ceasefire and an attempt at peace, as an attack on the entire transatlantic community. This is what's being reported by Axios. I mean, have you any insight into all of that? Because, I mean, committing, I suppose, first sight, this is all I've read, is all I've seen, committing to some sort of, Article 5 collective defence. It doesn't tell us precisely what sort of guarantee we're getting from America. In the case of NATO, it means, look, you attack NATO, you go to war with America and the rest of NATO. Maybe even a question mark about that. But this doesn't tell us very much at all, really. What do you think of it?
I think it's positive news for Ukraine because this is something that they've been asking for. They know they're not going to get into NATO anytime soon, especially because if there was another war, we do not want to get in a hot war with Russia. That would not be good for anyone. So that's why we've been using Ukraine almost as a proxy by helping them. But what that news from Axios probably means that Russia is not going to like that, and so then basically it's almost like a ping pong match where one side says this is bad for us, then the other side says, oh, this is good for us, bad for us. So it goes back and forth, and so they're trying to look for something in the middle to try to make this deal happen. But look at how the Biden administration was not able to accomplish anything in terms of a ceasefire or an enduring peace deal.
Yeah, I want to bring in Tim and Rachel in just a second. But you're absolutely right. I mean, a suggestion is made in the initial 28-point plan that's pared down with the help of of the Secretary of State to an 18-point plan. And what comes out of this next round of talks, well, who really knows? And we talk of American cooperation on collective security, whether that means intelligence cooperation, whether that means air cover from the other side of the NATO border. We don't know. Maybe they don't even have that kind of detail. But I mean, they're still talking, and to some limited extent, that's something, Daniel. But I mean, I don't know. Would you bet much on any real progress this time round?
I think it just comes in fits and starts, not to use a tired metaphor, but
Yeah.
there's no deal until all the points are agreed. I think there is this bill that's in Congress to really ramp up sanctions and secondary sanctions, try to squeeze Russia. And that has been worked on for about a year by
Yes.
people like Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, and Trump has indicated that if peace talks eventually do not work with Russia, then he will back this, and then it's a question of enforcement. But that would be a way to tell Russia, hey, you're not going to get away scot-free here if you're not helping out with the negotiations. And so
Yes.
that is a big stick that Trump has right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the legislation down in Congress, it gives the president the ultimate say. It doesn't impose secondary sanctions. It says the president may impose sanctions, clearly, if that's what he's minded to do. Rachel.
Well, actually, I was going to pick up on the efforts of the Republicans outside the White House, because, Daniel, you mentioned that Trump wants to solve this for good and not have to keep coming back and going, solve it again, solve it again, solve it again, because it certainly is the case that having to focus on foreign affairs has split the Republican Party and split the Trump base. Yeah. So I wonder, you've got some Russia hawks, like you said, trying to work on this legislation and get it through Congress to try and exert extra pressure on Russia. You've also got key elements of the MAGA base who think that this isn't where Trump's focus should be at all, and he should be focusing on America first, domestic issues. How are the tensions playing out in the party?
Yeah, this has been a long-running struggle for many decades in the Republican Party, but especially it used to be a kind of part of their party platform to be anti-Russia, to want to kind of crush the Soviet Union back during the Cold War. Now there is this new growth of the Republican Party that wants to just focus on America, that they kind of see that Putin and Trump are alike in certain ways in terms of being strongmen and not worrying about what Congress and the courts do. And so the people who like Trump, they have kind of embraced people like Viktor Orban, who are illiberal leaders, and they don't have as much of an issue. You saw Tucker Carlson, he interviewed Vladimir Putin and didn't really ask a lot of tough questions. And Carlson is a top ally, the most influential, probably conservative media personality in the country right now. And so this is something that they have to kind of reckon with, because Trump is going to face a lot of pressure for the midterm elections, because if he is seen as spending way too much time on foreign affairs like Venezuela, Ukraine, Gaza, and not enough on lowering prices, then Republicans are going to get crushed in the midterm elections.
Okay, I mean, if you can stay with us, Daniel, you're very, very welcome. Daniel Lippman there from Politico. I want to move on in a minute and talk a little bit about the Caribbean and Venezuela and the restlessness on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. about the possibility of America being responsible for war crimes, for murder. Those strikes on those boats in the Caribbean said to have been involved in drug trafficking, that is being questioned. And the strikes on the boats is certainly being questioned as possibly illegal, as possibly, as I say, a war crime. We'll talk about that. Get Daniel Lippman's view too on this. So let's just cross live into the White House briefing room in Washington, where the President's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, is now taking questions and giving a few remarks on the strikes on boats in the Caribbean.
And the administration denies that Secretary Hegseth gave the order.
The latter is true, Abe, and I have a statement to read for you here. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated. And I would just add one more point to remind the American public why these lethal strikes are taking place. Because this administration has designated these narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing. And under the previous administration, there was enough fentanyl trafficked into our country to kill every American man, woman, and child many times over. And so that's why you've seen a drastic difference in this administration's policy with respect to the last, and it's one of the many reasons the American public reelected this president and support this Secretary of War in conducting these strikes.
So to be clear, to clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so.
And a separate question, the president several days ago said it was his intention to pardon the former president of Honduras, who was a convicted.
We're going to put away from that live feed from the briefing room at the White House. We heard Caroline Levitt, the president's press secretary, defending the latest strikes on boats in Venezuela. Now, the latest strikes have been particularly controversial because it's been alleged and reported in the Washington Post newspaper that a strike was carried out on a boat identified under the president's designation as drug trafficking, but not just once but twice. And on the second occasion, it was reported that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, ordered a strike to kill survivors, to finally kill those who were in the water after the boat had been effectively destroyed. That raised questions of a war crime, killing of a helpless legitimate enemy who is helpless and in the water. That is not legal under the rules of war. Now, the Secretary of War denied giving such an order. The President said he'd accepted that assurance, and we just heard Caroline Levitt saying the order was given by Admiral Bradley, the commander in the theatre. So the argument goes on. But Daniel Lippman, this story really is picking up some momentum now, isn't it? With some Republicans as well as Democrats in Congress worried about breaches of international law and war crimes.
Yeah, we've seen in this Congress Republicans kind of act as enablers for the Trump administration on many different elements, including even not, approving Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War. There was a lot of questions about his background and his judgment. And you even had Tom Tillis, who is the senator from North Carolina, Republican, kind of regret actually voting for him. And so with that comment from Caroline Levitt, it seems like they're shifting the blame to that commander away from Pete Hegseth, especially because you just don't see a lot of green light, daylight between Trump and Hegseth. And so there's going to be a full congressional investigation into this about how this second strike happened and whether anyone did anything wrong. And so this is a very rare instance when the Republicans are saying, hey, we actually have the oversight powers in Congress. Let's use them.
And meanwhile, Daniel, we've just heard from the press secretary there. The row builds up and builds up, as we say, because we saw those Democrats, including Mark Kelly, Senator Mark Kelly, who's a war hero, who's not just a combat pilot in the American Navy, but a former astronaut. Now, he and those other Democrats put out a video telling service people they should not obey illegal orders. They didn't mention the Caribbean, but everyone considers that's what they had in mind. And now Kelly is being investigated by the Pentagon for a potential breach of the military code. We're talking about the use of the law against another known opponent and critic of President Trump, now spreading to the Pentagon. And it's been used, the law has been turned against the president's critics and enemies in other ways too. Lawfare was what President Trump accused the Democrats of using against him. Now he's being accused of very much the same thing with bells on. Yeah,
no, it's quite striking. They're probably going to take away part of Mark Kelly's pension. But it also has helped him politically in terms of raising his platform and his name ID among many Democrats, because he is seeking to probably go for the presidency in 2028. And if he doesn't win, then he could be the defense secretary if a Democrat does win in 2020, other than Kelly. And so it seems like both sides benefit, but of course the public loses because the Pentagon should usually be focused on war fighting, not investigating democratic opponents of the other party.
I mean, before you leave us, Daniel, I mean, we've seen a few Republicans joining in this argument over the Caribbean. We've seen Democrats, as it were, turning on Donald Trump over other particular issues, and they've included Marjorie Taylor Greene, the hugely fiery, outspoken congresswoman from the state of Georgia. I mean, how far are we seeing the transition into a lame duck period for President Trump, do you judge?
I think he still has another, 9 months or so of the most amount of his power he can have. But remember, Congress isn't really doing a ton of new domestic legislation. They all kind of wrapped it up in their big, beautiful bill that was a tax and spend bill a couple months ago. I think it passed by July 4th. And so far, they haven't really done anything since. There's not a lot on their agenda. And so if the attention of the public will definitely shift the day after the midterm elections to the presidential race. And so then Trump will really be seen as a lame duck. But when you lose people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and some other Republicans potentially, then they're all kind of looking to save their hide in case there is a bloodbath for the midterms.
Yeah, Tim Montgomery, what are your reflections on this?
Well, I actually think that we're at the turning point with the Trump presidency already, actually. I generally think on balance Trump has been good for America, and I'm glad he beat Kamala Harris. But tariffs are now beginning to bite. American inflation, which was probably the issue that most caused the rift with Biden and voters, it's been persistent. Voters have excused, a lot of American voters do not like how Trump behaves. They aren't that different from British voters. How on earth can Americans have voted for Trump? They voted for Trump because he was more likely to increase their wealth and he was controlling inflation. That is starting to be undone by this catastrophic error that he's believed in all these years, which is tariffs. And so it's a very clear link in American politics. As the economy deteriorates, people lose faith in the incumbent politician. So I don't think we have to wait till the midterms. And then what you've mentioned, John, the MAGA crowd, Venezuela, they don't like wars and around. A lot of the MAGA people don't want America involved overseas at all. The Epstein thing, and what else have I written down here? Oh, yes, inflation. I've already mentioned that. There's quite a lot now that is a gap, not just between Trump and the average American voter, but his hardcore base. And I don't think he knows how to cope with it. The danger is that he does more and more in inverted commas, outrageous things like Venezuela, because he's trying to distract from tariffs. He's begun to unwind tariffs and acknowledge they had an inflationary effect, but the damage has been done. Once inflation is in a system, it's hard to get out. It is always the economy stupid, and Donald Trump has been very stupid indeed about tariffs.
Well, and the approval numbers when it comes to, a lot of things, but including handling the economy and tariffs, they are pretty dire for the president. I guess ask him the question, he'll say his numbers are astonishingly wonderful. But they are truly
the best
not.
Ever, Don, the best ever.
The best ever.
Well, you should ring in if he's a regular listener, as you say. You're telling me the truth, John.
Well, I mean, Mr. President, you're very welcome. Whether send me a text, 87222, start with the word times, Mr. President, and joining the conversation. You'd be very, very welcome. Anyway, Daniel Lippman at the Politico, thank you so much for joining us.